Hello, I'm the Biochemist, and I've got an experiment. I'm searching for the highs, the lows, and the mids of the PlayStation catalog here on the PS1 Library Deep Dive. We're checking out Tomba today, a unique 2D side-scroller. It's a pretty awesome game, but why didn't it sell all that well? Stay tuned to the end because I've got a bit of a theory on that. We'll also talk about one of the game's creators, Tokuro Fujiwara. But first, we gotta start where all games start, and that's, of course, the cover art. 30 seconds, let's go. This is pretty damn good. The eye catches Tomba in the top right first, and he's very well designed. The pink hair is so striking it's contrasted nicely with that green loincloth thingy. His mischievous smile lets you know what's going to go on in this game, and so do the pigs freaking out in the bottom left. The title is right in the middle with an exclamation point. This ain't Tomba, it's Tomba! The only add part about this is the background. It's not all bad, but the 3D models aren't as clean as the art in the foreground, though it does convey accurately how the game will look.
Amazing.
And here's the cover from Japan. Somehow, it's even better. I love the clay aesthetic here. It's so different than everything else you'd see. And I do like this little pink Tomba that's incorporated into the logo here. Very nice touch. So, what's up with this game? Well, it was released in 1997 in Japan, then a few months later in 1998 in North America, and then in Europe under the name Tomba. Made by a little Japanese company called Whoopee Camp, it was well received when it came out, but did not become a bestseller. It did sell well enough to warrant a sequel, which we'll get to someday, but it certainly did not achieve the status that Crash and Spyro got. We'll try to figure out why it wasn't super popular, but before that, what's this game about? So this PS1 game is about our eponymous, flamboyantly haired, absolutely jacked boy named Tomba. His grandfather's ring has been stolen by all these pigs you see all over the place. Years prior, 7 evil pigs came to the land and started fucking shit up.
You uncultured swine!
Now Tomba's got to get that ring back by capturing each evil pig inside of a magical bag that he has to find hidden somewhere throughout the land. Whenever you capture a new pig, the land gets healed a little bit, and some more things get unlocked for you to do. Yeah, this game's a Metroidvania, so there's quite a bit of exploring to be had here. The first thing you'll notice surely are the graphics. What a unique looking game. It's a fun one to look at, with plenty of colors injecting life into the setting. The sprites that represent Tomba and all the NPCs are very detailed too, bringing them to life against the 3D polygonal background. They really stand out against it. The main attraction here, and the twist on the platforming genre, is the plane switching, jumping from foreground to background and back pretty freely. While certainly not the first platformer to do this, Tomba does it well because it gives the player quite a bit of freedom with how you hop around the land. The design of the world also really accentuates how fun it is to hop around. I do wish the switching was a little faster though, because it's fairly slow considering how often you have to do it. It's also not perfect. Sometimes it's not very obvious where you can and can't jump to the next plane, and there are occasionally invisible walls that just block your path. What also helps Tomba stand out from other platformers is its structure. Like I said, Metroidvania here, with explicit quests and side quests that you have to accomplish. An early quest, for example, is having to rescue some chicks from their captors and then return them to the 100-year-old man. These quests and side quests earn you points as you play, allowing you to progress through the game. Tomba's quite a bit deeper than I was expecting, to be honest. I thought it was just going to be kind of like a straight up 2D platformer. I had no idea it was going to be a Metroidvania when I picked it up at first. There's a good amount of equipment you need to discover that improve Tomba's abilities as you progress, like new pants to help you get faster and more agile, better throwable weapons, and even some magical powers that you can get towards the end. The best of these unlockables has to be Baron the dog. You just do a chain of side quests to unlock him, but once you accomplish it, Baron joins you and allows you to fast travel to anywhere you've been on the map, whenever you want. Extremely useful in this game, and well, just look at him, he's freaking adorable. Aww. There are even cool small villages you get to walk around through, and talk to all the townsfolk to learn more about the game and what quests you need to do. It's an interesting twist on the genre, having a lot of RPG elements injected into your jumping game here that I certainly was not expecting. Tomba's a joy, really, overall. The whimsical atmosphere it creates makes it really fun to play through. The personality that Whoopee Camp ironed into this game makes it so memorable. Everything put together, Tomba is pretty modern feeling, way ahead of its time. It has some good quality of life features as well, like a map of the world, quick travel, and a menu filled with all the quests so that you can keep track of what you've been doing. It's certainly not ideal compared to what we have today. The map does leave a lot to be desired because it's a bit confusing, to be honest, and the quest pages could benefit from having a bit more detail, but it's been a solid start. The controls are a little stiffer than I was used to for 2D platformers at first, but as I said, Tomba gets pretty agile with the upgrades you find. His jump is fairly floaty, but this plays into how you defeat most of your enemies. Typically you jump on top of your foes, grabbing them instantly and then launching them in the direction you choose. It's an extremely satisfying mechanic. You can also use your various weapons you find throughout the game to stun the baddies. These are decent fun, but pouncing on them is where it's at. I really enjoy the snappiness of how your character goes from plane to plane too. How Tomba grabs onto his enemies, ledges, and walls makes this game just a blast to play. There's a real tactile sense you get here. The boss battles were actually pretty fun too, since they focus entirely on this grabbing and throwing mechanic. Each of the evil pigs is defeated in the same way, by jumping on top of them and throwing them into the bag. The pig bag is a moving target, and these pigs aren't too keen on getting captured, so they utilize their magic to avoid you at all costs. Each pig in their respective stage was unique, offering different hazards to thwart Tomba. Some of these were very easy, while others were a little less easy. Unfortunately, the final boss was beatable in the same way as well. I was hoping they would put a twist on the swine to end all swine here, but sadly they did not. There were some points of frustration for me in my playthrough, to be honest. Specifically the Phoenix Mountain. I freaking hated this part. Here you have heavy winds that affect your jumps a lot, and tiny platforms above endless pitfalls that lead to quick deaths. Very quick.
Piece of shit. Fuck this piece of shit. Fuck you, Nintendo. Fuck you, Nintendo.
Here there are also these damn plants that eat you if you touch them at all, and then spit you back earlier in the level. I hate backtracking for stuff like that, but it's get good, I guess, whatever. I did manage, and the game does offer you items like the parasol that help with bits like that, but man. There were also a couple of glitches here and there, but nothing game breaking. They typically occurred when Tomba tried to snap to some platforms that moved. I also didn't like that every once in a while, you're supposed to talk to some people twice to get all the info you need, when most of the time, if you try to talk to them multiple times, they just repeat in the same lines. So sometimes I would just miss where I needed to go talk to activate the next event. It's an RPG trope, yes, but it's still a little frustrating when events don't get activated just because I only talked to the guy once instead of twice. Despite some of these gripes, Tomba's really a solid game, so what happened with those sales we mentioned earlier? According to VG Charts, which isn't 100% reliable, Tomba sold over 250,000 units, not including the Japanese sales figures, so who knows exactly how accurate this number is. This certainly would not be a bad first outing for Whoopee Camp, I don't think, and it did sell well enough to warrant Tomba 2 coming out a few years later. But why was this game not a bestseller? It certainly had the quality to be. While I can really appreciate the graphics today, they may have actually been a problem for consumers in '98. It's 2D. During the PlayStation's life, many people were focused on pushing 3D and saw 2D games as kinda old news. Even if the game was great, it being 2D was a disadvantage for many people. Thanks to the website Moby Games, I found a few different reviews from back in the day. One review from Computer and Video Games magazine called the graphics basic. Not everyone shared this sentiment though, as a GameSpot review from '98 called Tomba a break from the glut of 3D action games. So what gives? Let's look at some similar titles from the time. One in particular comes to mind, and that's Klonoa. This outing from Namco could be considered a sister game to Tomba in my opinion. It's another cult classic 2D platformer with a similar, beautiful art style that was critically well received but only fared decently when it came to sales. And who can forget Castlevania Symphony of the Night? This legendary title was released in '97 before Tomba, and it too sold poorly initially, only blowing up in sales and becoming a quote greatest hit for PS1 through word of mouth. It too was a 2D platformer that was initially overlooked for lacking a third dimension, I think. But now it's again regarded as a classic today. So why else couldn't Tomba become a hit? Because there were some 2D games that were big for PlayStation. I have two guesses here. One is brand recognition. A game like Symphony had the power and recognition of the Castlevania franchise, and the then giant name of Konami behind it. Though it did not sell like hotcakes to start, fans were at least a bit familiar with Castlevania, so there was less risk, I guess you could say, in going out and buying that game. Tomba was a brand new IP from a completely unknown developer in Whoopee Cushion, so about as much risk as you can get there. My second guess to why this game didn't blast off is, again, the graphics. Specifically though, the fact that they're cartoony. While this may seem a bit confusing on the surface, because hey, again, I think this game looks great, let's dig a bit deeper. The PlayStation over here was largely marketed as a cool console, and it really exploded in popularity because of this, especially in comparison with rival Nintendo. Early popular games like Resident Evil, Wipeout, and Twisted Metal helped establish this adult atmosphere that Sony was promoting, and it continued throughout the life of the system with other games like Metal Gear Solid and Final Fantasy VII. I hypothesized that Symphony of the Night was able to break through people's anti-2D bias at the time because it was cool as hell, and it was a good game too. The cartoony games were also able to be very successful too on the PS1. See Crash Bandicoot, Spyro, Ape Escape, Parappa. These games were either in 3D, so they were instantly eye-catching and seen as cool, or offered a brand new style of gameplay. See my vids on Ape Escape and Prepper to learn more about that. Tomba, unfortunately for its sales, had cartoony graphics and opted to refine the 2D platformer instead of pushing the boundaries. While it ended up giving us a damn fine game that did actually push some boundaries in reality, its appearance just didn't fit with what audiences were looking for at the time. Again, the same could be said with sister game Klonoa. If you scroll through all the titles that were deemed greatest hits in this part of the world, here's the short list of games, to my knowledge, that we can call 2D side-scrollers, at least based on the list that I found online. We have Symphony of the Night. Again, we said this has cool factor and name recognition, so I can see why this game blew up. Mega Man 8. It's a bit on the cutesy side, but it has that name recognition. Mega Man X4 is wicked cool. Again, name recognition coming from Capcom and being a big series. Next one, you have SpongeBob SquarePants Super Sponge, classic. SpongeBob was and still is massive as a brand, so it's got that name recognition. Disney's Tarzan is a Disney movie, so again, name recognition. And then Oddworld Abe's Odyssey was the greatest hit too.
Hello.
It has that cool factor, no name recognition, but the darkness and the weirdness I think made up for it in the eyes of consumers. The only other true 2D platformer that is a greatest hit is Rayman. Like Tomba, Rayman doesn't really have that cool factor going for it, at least by 90s standards, and I'd say it's on the cuter side of the spectrum. Being the first game in its series from a yet to be proven, I'd say, French company called Ubisoft, it definitely does not have the name recognition. So why was Rayman able to become a hit and then subsequently a massive franchise, but not Tomba? Well, I think there's a simple reason for that, actually. Rayman was a launch title. In North America and Europe, when the PlayStation was brand new on store shelves, people would have been willing to try any game as it came out, especially if it's any good, simply because there were not a ton of options to choose from, right? My guess is that if Tomba had been released about 3 years earlier in place of Rayman, it would have blown up as much as that game did. While I know that there were other successful games outside of those branded greatest hits, I do think this list summarizes people's taste in games very well. But that's just okay, I won't go there. Regardless, Tomba left a great legacy behind as a cult classic, and I think we should all be able to appreciate this awesome little title for what it is. I'm excited to check out the sequel someday. Here's the part of the video where we look at the game's credits and try to learn a bit more about one of its creators. We're talking about Tokuro Fujiwara today, Tomba's producer and director. Fujiwara had a long career in games, starting back in the early 80s. He started at Osaka's designer college and rocked with Konami at first, but then hopped over to rival Capcom. While there, he would help create some iconic games like Ghosts and Goblins, Strider, Bionic Commando, multiple Mega Man games, Breath of Fire, and the OG Resident Evil. He decided to leave Capcom in the mid-90s despite these successes to create the studio Whoopee Camp that made Tomba here. In an interview with PlayStation Magazine found on shmupulations.com, Fujiwara said that, quote, "Basically, I guess I just needed to make an action-style game." In that interview, he also acknowledged that making Tomba as a 2D game in that era was a bit of a risk, but he felt that 2D is able to let players feel the fun and excitement in a straightforward way. If you want to call making a 2D game a challenge, then sure, it's a challenge, but rather than letting 3D graphics determine what we were able to do, I guess you could say we decided to prioritize making something that's really genuinely fun. I think I agree with him in a way. Especially in that era, 3D was really novel, so there was a lot of question marks on how exactly you should make a fun game. By focusing on the tried and true 2D, they were able to make something pretty good out of Tomba. Whoopee Camp would unfortunately close its doors after only one more game, Tomba 2. But Fujiwara would end up working on more Ghosts and Goblins games with Capcom in the 21st century, with his most recent release being Ghosts and Goblins Resurrection in 2021. I was surprised I didn't recognize Fujiwara's name when I learned out all the things that he worked on, because a lot of those are some of my favorite games. Well, it turns out, like many others in the early days of game creation, he often went uncredited or went by an alias. He commonly went by Professor F, so if you see that name in any old games, you know who to thank. So cheers to Fujiwara on bringing us this awesome platformer. Thanks for watching, and be sure to recommend below what PS1 game I should do next. In my next video, we'll be spinning a wheel with all the viewer recommendations, and we'll randomly select one of those. Tune in next week for Crash Bandicoot. Peace!